Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Team Tuesday this week with John Albrecht. Hi John, welcome back.
Hi Vasco, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So John, on Tuesdays we talk about teams, but we start first with the book that most influenced you. So what was it, John?
The book that had the most aha moments. There's been a load of books that influenced me. Time to Think, The Body Keeps Score, Contempt to Curiosity, From Contempt to Curiosity, Nonviolent Communication, to name a few. But the one that sort of was, okay, is One from Many, and Visa and the Rise of the Chaordic Organization by Dee Hock, which is a fascinating book about Agile, but it's not about Agile.
Can you tell us, so first of all, thank you for sharing that. That's one of the books that I most appreciated in my own journey as a Scrum Master. But share with us, John, what were some of the key insights, some of the key lessons, maybe things that changed your approach after reading the book?
So it's the community aspect in One for Many. I like books that are stories. So the way Dee takes us on his journey from childhood, he talks about patriarchy from a sense and how organizations exist where there's someone telling someone else what to do. And he takes us through into the creation of Visa. But it's sort of this Chaordic organization, which is halfway between chaos and order, which he sees as this magical place of where good stuff happens. He has a number of sort of principles around what it means to be a leader in a Chaordic organization, and it aligns very nicely with servant leadership. But that Chaordic organization is sort of halfway between. He describes it a point between chaos and order. I think in modern terms we would call that an organization that deals very well with complexity. In Stacy Matrix terms or Cynefin terms, it's a place between chaos and order. It's that balancing point. And in that point, you need flat structures, you need community, you need to make things visible, you need to have transparency, you empower everyone, you make it visible, and you include everyone as much as you can in the decisions and what's going on. And the way he describes Visa and the creation of Visa before Agile was a thing, against these Agile principles that he doesn't call Agile, was fascinating. The big takeaway, and I don't think we've got an answer to it at the end, is he describes, I presume it's around the same time as big Prince 2 transformations are coming in. He describes kind of MBA and people with multiple degrees coming into the organization, and the organization losing its complexity, and again, it's Chaordic nature, losing the thing. And he says, what would you do differently? And how would you put an antivirus or a way to protect an organization from that level of kind of change and that evolution from Chaordic to something else, to something that's more simple, I suppose. And I reflected on that, and I think my big takeaway is you shouldn't. And I think this plays into Wardley mapping. So if you think of Wardley mapping and the evolution from pioneers all the way to town planners, you need all of the people in your organization. And organizations are at different levels on their life cycle. And it's not about having a monoculture. It's not about having one way of working in an organization. It's got variety and variety of thought. And I think the question is, how can you have an organization that sustains that variety and is open to all of the people and different ways of working? And that might not be Agile for many of the contexts. It's Agile for some of the contexts, but how can we include different ways of working in our organizations? So yeah, I think the big takeaway from that is fantastic. It's about servant leadership. It's about community and growing this organization. But on reflection, that isn't right for all organizations, and it's not right for all situations. You need to be context aware.
Absolutely. Great book, definitely. Thank you for that. Now we turn our attention to teams and how sometimes they develop these patterns or behaviors that ultimately lead to problems. So share that story with us, John.
People are people, and people have different life scripts. They've got different experiences, and they treat every situation totally differently. When people work together in a team, you have a shared set of life scripts that interact, and it can cause all sorts of interesting things. It's the beauty of teams, but it can appear to be frustrating for a Scrum Master. You see teams with destructive behaviors, saying things to each other. You see politicking within the team. You see drama within the team. And over the years, I've seen it in various different teams and various different organizations. Two developers not seeing eye to eye. One person just throwing in sort of eggs into the team randomly in different shapes and different directions, and sort of making the whole landscape totally uneven. Teams which have split in two, where you've got half the team going one way, half the team going the other way. If you boil it all down, it's 5 dysfunctional teams, isn't it? But you boil it all down, trust is the bedrock. Trust is the thing that you have at the bottom. And without trust, you've got nothing else. You need to build trust. Again, within a team, you've got a team of adults, you've got a team of folks who are competent, unique individuals. It's not your responsibility to do anything with individuals in that. You can create the landscape, you can make the adjustments, you can try and set the conditions to ensure that folks can see each other's points of view, but it's not your baby. You're just the midwife to the situation. So yeah, how this plays out within teams, or how this has played out with the teams of the past, where you've got teams that fall apart, or they're sort of at each other a little bit. As a Scrum Master, you talk to those two individuals, you find out what they need, and you try and bring those folks together if they want to be brought together. You try and surface the stuff. You try and reduce it from becoming personal. You try and get each other to see each other's points of view. But again, as a Scrum Master, that's not it's this rescue thing we mentioned earlier in the week. It's not your responsibility to fix or rescue or do any of these things. You are a Scrum Master. Ultimately, you're responsible for the process of Scrum and setting the conditions to ensure success. There are many ways of doing that. And by doing that, individuals stand a much better chance of being able to see each other's mental models and build bridges between them. And you can do one-on-one coaching, you do all these things, but ultimately it's not down to you. Some folks just don't get on with each other, and that's okay. That's fine.
And it's not a reflection on the work of the Scrum Master, because those, let's say, lacks of chemistry or gaps in chemistry are things that not necessarily even trained professionals in psychology can handle.
No, and shouldn't. And if you're trying to go down that route, and it's that fixed thing I said, it's a really fine line. You are going, I think you're going too far. And if I feel myself doing it, I try and step back now. I mentioned earlier in the week about sort of when it hasn't worked, and it's that ability to step back. I step back and I look at the process. I work on setting the conditions. I'm working with the team to set the conditions for success, but it's not my responsibility for that. However, this is a system, yeah? By setting those conditions, by doing Scrum well and finding what folks need and resolving the impediments that folks have and surfacing information and coaching and I'm not going to say mentoring, but sort of having that sort of spirit, personal spirit, believing in the art of the possible and being a role model for that kind of behavior in yourself. I would say being a good servant leader without falling down the rescue trap, you stand a much, much bigger chance of being able to work with those folks to find out what works for them. But it's this is what I love about being a Scrum Master. It's this fascinating line. There's this fine line that we tread, and it's understanding where that line is. And that line isn't about other people. Ultimately, it's about yourself and how you see the world and how you see others.
Absolutely. Great insights. Thank you for sharing that, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Vasco.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.